welcome to another episode of the Granite List Live, where we explore all things employee benefits and human capital related. I'm your host, Sally Pace, and today we are joined by two dynamic gentlemen who are going to really dive into the world of technology as it relates to what we're going to refer to as the industrial athlete. I've got Nic Patee with WorkRight and Mark Heaysman with Longitude 6 on today's show. Guys, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Nic, I'm going to ask you to start us off, and I'd love for you to talk about what an industrial athlete is. What does that phrase mean? And how does WorkRight address this space?
Well, first off, it's good to chat with you, Sally. It's always fun to get together with you. Same with Mark as well. When we think about the industrial athlete, I can't remember the specific phrase that's used in the dictionary, but the definition of an athlete is something along the lines of someone who plays a game using physical agility, speed, and endurance to accomplish their game. When we pair that back, that's exactly what most of America is doing when they're building products or distributing products or getting things to us to use. They're using strength, physical endurance, and agility to accomplish a task. It's just not a game. And so from WorkRight's perspective, we see that industrial athlete or working athlete as everyday Americans doing stuff that needs to be done. We just don't typically care for them like athletes. And so our focus is trying to flip that and use the same evidence-based research and excellent care to care for those working athletes, to provide for them in the same way we would the ones that are playing games on TV. And so our goal at WorkRight is, how do we keep them safe? How do we use cutting-edge research to empower them to optimize their performance? And doing that through a sports medicine lens. So that's what the working athlete or the industrial athlete is to us, and that's how WorkRight's trying to serve them.
And you talked about being on the cutting edge, and you all have historically been just that. I know wearables are certainly not something that you are unfamiliar with because you all were the leaders in this space. Can you talk about the history of wearables specifically for employers in the industrial athlete space?
Well, I think it's a perfect segue into our other guest, Mark, as well, because it was probably 2014 when Mark and I first met. Actually, all three of us, really. And it was because we were trying to understand, how do we create data sets around ergonomics? How do we understand objectively the risk that our workforce is facing? And there really wasn't anything back then. And so we started scouring the globe to see what was around. And at that time, wearables was a very obscure topic. But Mark in Australia was working for a company called Dorsivy back then, and he had an early solution in that space. And fast forward, wearables are now commonplace. It's a common topic in the industrial sector, and they really kind of have progressed. They started with assessment-based tools. It was more of a spot check. Think of that as like early days Dorsivy or common practice Life Booster now, or among others. Then it progressed or changed to where there was monitoring and people that would wear sensors all day long in mass quantities. That sector's had a tougher time getting acceptance or utilization, I think maybe because people are less willing or wanting to have sensors on them all the time. But that's the other phase, and that's, think of like SODR analytics or Make You Safe, among others. And then you've progressed over the course of the last couple years into the integration of computer vision and using machine learning and various algorithms to start to create those same data sets without the use of sensors on the body. And that's where Longitude 6 and some of the stuff they're doing currently is really exciting, among others. But for us, it's been a journey. It's been a 10-year process that started with bringing the first wearable sensors for the industrial athlete to the United States with Mark, and since then trying most of them and continuing to use a few.
Well, thank you for outlining it. I'm going to kick it over to Mark now. Mark, tell us a little bit about Longitude 6. Who are you and what do you do?
Nic said some great words, so I guess I should just leave it at that, shouldn't I? But look, we're a small company. We started a few years ago, actually just on the start of COVID, which was a great time to start a business. But we're an Australian company. We operate in the US and a little bit in the UK and in New Zealand now. I guess the best way to explain us is we've just put a lot of effort into learning and understanding what technologies can do for business and what technologies are out in the world. So the nicest way to explain us is that we really enable companies and organizations to know what technologies to use and how to use them the best. So we have multiple technologies at our stable. We're always looking at new ones, as Nic mentioned. We've really perfected or working on perfecting the way of aggregating information out of different technologies. We know how to use the data probably as well as anyone for the technologies we have because we just focus so hard on that. We sell technologies, we train and support, and we use the technologies day to day just with our clients as well so we can inform our clients of what they need to do. We're a boutique sort of business, but I think we're very good at what we do.
Well, I can attest to that, having known both of you for a while. And what I hear both of you saying is that it's not you're not representing one specific kind of technology. It is, I guess you could say, technology agnostic, but looking for the most superior pieces that are available. Really excited about the partnership that you all have. But can somebody or both of you share a little bit about the history of that partnership and how it came about?
I'm happy to jump in, but I want to go back to something that you just mentioned about technology agnostic real quick, if that's okay, Sally.
Sure.
I think it's a key point to highlight, both from the Longitude 6 perspective, but also the WorkRight side. From a WorkRight side, we're the service provider caring for the frontline working athletes. And one of the challenges we've seen on technology across the board is companies that develop the technology hold on to their technology far too long past its usability because they have to make up for all the money they've invested in developing those products. And so the challenge with people that are tied to a specific tech solution means that they get stuck trying to sell, solutions to people that have been passed by other technologies out there. And so from a WorkRight perspective, we've never wanted to be tied to a technology. We want to be technology agnostic, as you said, because we want to be able to solve problems for our customers. And that's at the end of the day what we're trying to do. From a Longitude 6 perspective, that's their role, is they're sourcing and looking for everything that's out there and trying to create a marketplace that helps people solve their problems as opposed to funneling a specific product or two. And so I think that's a really foundational point. I hope I didn't overstep, Mark, on that. But that, for us, when we talk about partnership, was the key part for us. We need a group that's out there that's looking at everything, that has a large swath of different tools available that allows our people to be able to use those when they have specific problems on site. But it gives us the flexibility of not spending all the time to do the due diligence and research to understand what is best in class at that time. And that's where the Longitude 6 side comes in so critically for us. And from a partnership perspective, it just aligned perfectly.
I do remember leaving that meeting thinking that I'd met someone that was, even early days in your business, pushing boundaries, challenging values, exploring what could be when there was no such thing as some of the stuff we were talking about. And I think we just aligned so well on exactly that. I mean, how do you keep on top of technologies and where it's all going in the world? I mean, if you think that's nearly 10 years ago, so much has changed and it changes by the minute now. I think the other part too is that what I love about your question, Sally, about the partnership, I think if you look at Longitude as being a technology enabler and really focusing on how to interpret technology, and then people like Nic's business, and there isn't any better, WorkRight, in being able to translate that on the ground to their clients. So Nic's business is all about people and how to help them perform their jobs safely and their work safely and efficiently. We're about just providing tools and intellectual capability to do that. So I think the partnership sort of works operationally, but also I think culturally and our alignment in values is just from day one's been identical. So yeah, it's a good relationship.
And walk me through what the benefit is for an employer having both of you at the table.
Look, I think one, we've got the same values. We prefer to be judged our capability. We don't need, I don't need onerous conversations and contracts to keep us honest. I mean, we just work hard to do what we're good at. We're always developing and always challenging what we do internally and matches. That means the clients are always going to be getting something exciting. And for Nic to be able to challenge us, and his team do that very well, they're quite hard on us at times, but that helps us go to another level. I mean, we just keep improving because of that. And the footprint that Nic provides us is amazing to be able to talk confidently to people in the United States about being able to service them. And I guess to finish it off, we try and do what we commit to do.
Nic, anything you want to add?
Well, I think just the underbelly of everything we're talking about is data and the ability to leverage data and use that strategically. While it does seem fairly elementary, it really is the forward facing space where we're going right now. We have been able to aggregate data on everything, and the ability to parse that together and use that strategically in your operation is the cutting edge. And so from us, when we think about musculoskeletal sprain and strain disorders, they're the largest cost driver for almost all work comp scenarios. They're also the leading cause of fraudulent claims. They're the most ambiguous claims out there. And on the benefit side, they're a top 5 driver in costs and have some of those same challenges. What we're doing is we're able to start aggregating massive data sets that starts allowing us to make decisions and then come back and evaluate those. So from a return on investment perspective, it starts to put tangible, objective data to one of your largest cost drivers and then drive solutions that hopefully bring that down. Traditionally, we're doing that, and the marketplace is appreciating that. And I think from our standpoint, it's been a banner year, and hopefully it's a testimony to doing that well.
So, what is next, especially as you look at the wearables horizon? What do you see as being kind of this next level?
So it's a brilliant question, and I guess it's the essence of both of our businesses about what is next, and are we part of informing next, or are we just waiting to see what comes? I dare say we are the ones that will help form what comes, even around technologies. I think the word wearables is obviously very powerful, but Nic's business and ours are looking at AI products. We're looking at wearables. We're looking at all sorts of products that look at people now. So we're not just looking at jobs. We look at people and how they are able to work and their well-being. We're looking at the environment and the places those people work. We're looking at mental health and people's well-being. So all of these things now are supported by technology. So our bandwidth on and our breadth of products is expanding all the time. So I think it's actually as much about how do you look for collective products and how do you get them to talk to each other? Because Nic made a great point. Most technology developers only focus on their technology and they miss the broader nuance of how a company needs to operate and think. And I think that's our responsibility, is to bring all the different parts together. And it's just about pushing boundaries and finding products that are happy to push boundaries, because some aren't. Some are happy with who they are.
You just mentioned mental health, and both of you focus on the physical, the musculoskeletal, like you said, sprains and strains. I know, Nic, you and the WorkRight team actually educated me a couple of years ago about the construction industry having the highest suicide rate in the country for any other vertical. So, what is the application to mental health in the space in which both of you work?
We have another great advantage, Sally, in the fact that we work across different geographies. So, we've got a great litmus test on many, many things, being the United States and how it operates state by state and different legislative frameworks. Then we've got Australia, then we've got the UK, and then we've got Canada, and we've got New Zealand, all very robust in how they approach things. Mental health is a big part of it. You could call it psychosocial, you could talk at mental health. There's a lot of elements. There are technologies out there in various forms of development that are starting to become very serious contenders to inform of where people are at. And those things we're looking at now and testing.
Nic, from your perspective, what do you see as kind of the next level?
I think there is some areas that could be high potential. I think You've got Meta investing in the Ray-Ban glasses, and Apple, I think, announced today actually that they're coming out with something new in that space. And I think there's real safety and health potential in some of those artificially AI enhanced optics that could be fascinating. I don't know if that's necessarily the future, but I think to the point Mark made, I think for us, it's really how do we aggregate data and apply machine learning principles to that to be able to funnel quality information to our clinicians quicker. Mm-hmm. And so a good example of that is something that we just had happen, and I'll keep everyone names out of it, but we had our software start to aggregate this data from multiple different sources, and they were able to draw correlations to reduction in claims based on quality of proactive interventions. What I mean by that is the specificity of how specific the documentation was on the coaching that took place in the workplace environment. The more specific the coaching, the lower the risk of injury in that facility. And so from a quality perspective, we were able to start looking at our facilities and see, okay, here's a potential leading indicator for us on how proactive we're being. That's something that, our data and analytics teams had never picked up on. The only reason we're picking up on it is because we're using larger supercomputer things to start to scrub this that begins to recognize that. And so that's one minor example, but I think that is where the future really lies, is how do we get more and more inputs into data sets that are using machine learning to be able to look for predictive analytics. And so it's not fancy words. We've been hearing about it for years, but now it's actually happening. It's not someone working in a spreadsheet in the back room. It's actually computers assisting people to make good decisions.
Well, Nic, I know you're not going to mention names, and I know you're one of the most confidently humble people I know, and you don't brag much about the laundry list of your clients, but for frame of reference, WorkRight works with some of the most well-known, largest brands in our country, protecting people that are, like you said, doing really hard work to keep the nation moving. And I know that you've got success stories. Without naming names, will you share some of those success stories?
I think the testimony to the success would be, we've had a good year. We don't enter tons of requests for proposals like the big, large Fortune company competitive bids that put out. But this year we entered 5 of them and we've won 4 out of 5. And so talking about that as a testimony to success, I hit on it because we're not usually the low cost option. We're somewhere in that middle to upper tier cost perspective. And when you're going into these RFPs, they're typically talking about cost. Another example is across the board, we're finding more successful ways of integrating more solutions into the data sets we're using. And I think for us, from a strategic perspective, our biggest change over the last year is our ability to leverage that data that's inbound. And so the information we're steering to our clinicians is 100 times better than it was a year ago. And so last win I'd share, and it's a big picture win, but for one of those RFPs, they asked us to look at our last 5 years of history. They wanted to know how many of our accounts made it 3 years. For perspective, we work on a month-to-month commitment. We don't do termed contracts. And of our most recent 50 groups, 49 of them had made it 36 months. And the one that didn't was like 31 months or something like that. And so I think that's the proof that's in the pudding, to use a phrase we like in WorkRight. And, our people are keeping us around because we're driving results. They're not doing it because of a contract. Our responsibility is to have a sense of urgency that says we're not going to be okay with just doing what we're doing. We're going to consistently have a sense of urgency that looks for those opportunities downstream. What can we do more? And that's our goal and our commitment and responsibility.
Awesome. Mark, final thoughts? Anything we haven't covered that our listeners need to know about?
If I can just loosely go back into the success piece, I think for me, watching everything from a little company in the back blocks of Australia look at data to change people's work shifts to enable them to keep working when they're in their 50s and 60s, to me is really exciting. To then be able to launch a product that gives companies a chance to use 5 or 6 technologies and that be adopted by a large carrier in the US, that's exciting. So we can go from one extreme to another, and then to have the capacity to look people in the eye and say we can deliver on the ground with a partnership like WorkRight. To me, they're all big successes for us.
I have no doubt that the two of you will continue to innovate and grow together and continue to make a massive mark on the industrial workforce in the United States, and Mark, certainly for you beyond the US. But for today, thank you both for joining us. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of The Granite List Live.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Granite List Live. Access our entire library by visiting your favorite podcast venue or subscribe on our site, thegranitelist.live.